Okay, I think it's time for us to get going. It's just after 3 o'clock. So welcome everybody to this webinar, The Surprising Effect of Empowerment. My name is 𝑬𝒎𝒑𝒐𝒊𝒔𝒊𝒏𝒈 I'm the CEO for Lovezone Holding Group, which includes the company Lean Dimensions International and gets certified for operational excellence. So this seminar is obviously around empowerment. And I also want to say first before we start that this is not meant to be a sales pitch at all. Not going to try to sell you anything. It's just to share knowledge and some thoughts around empowerment and what it can give you. And of course, you know already that we are a consultant company, so we don't have to discuss that too much, I guess. First, I'm going to talk about the definitions of empowerment, so that's clear to everyone what I'm thinking about. Then I'm going to take you through something called the Firebox Model, a little bit around something called conditions for empowerment. Some stories will be weaved in between here to give some examples of situations and such. And also there's a chance to ask questions. So if you want to ask questions, just log it in there. I'll get back to it in the end of the session. I might not see the question when I'm talking, but by the end I'll make sure that I answer as many questions as possible. So I see there's a few people already. Hello everybody from Germany to West Virginia to UK here. It's very nice to see you all there. So let's start with the definition of empowerment. So the definition here and the thought around empowerment, first of all, it sounds like when you empower somebody else, you give away power to another person. It could sound for some people that you're also losing your own power because you give it to somebody else. But in reality, what happens when you empower somebody is that you create a bond, a loyalty bond with other people. Your power is going to increase. You get to have more things done and have a better impact on your organization because the people around you are acting individually, you can say on your behalf in a sense. So empowering somebody else is something that increases your power as a manager as well. The word power and control are often words that sounds negative. However, we don't want to put any value on them. This is just what happens. If you are a manager, you want to have the power to do things. So you want to have control over certain things. Otherwise, it's hard for you to do anything and get any effect. So it's not meant to be any value there, and at least not any negative value. So first what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk you through this empowerment side and on as something called a Firebox Model. I believe I created this, but you know what it's like. Sometimes you see things you read and you might in the end think that you created it, but it just came out from me and I thought that was my thing, but I'm not 100% sure, of course. Doesn't really matter much, I think. But a person who is empowered is somebody who is willing, able, and allowed to complete a task. It is task oriented. That's important to remember. And when it comes to this Firebox model, I'm going to flip over to my side camera and I'm going to step up here and show you the model, and I'm going to talk you through a little story around that, how this came about and what I did with it, but also how you can use it. And feel free, if you want to use this video later on or use the content of it, feel free to do that in any way you like. Obviously, I'm happy if you keep our name on it there, so that we honor the origin of it. But other than that, just feel free to use anything you like. And in the end, you will also see an email address should you have any questions after. Just nothing we will charge for. Just if you have questions and you want to reach out and you have some thoughts around it or so on that you want something answered. So here's the side camera, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw and explain at the same time here. So first of all, the idea with the model is that empowerment is not something that's real. It's not in the way where you can touch it, right? It is something that happens in our own minds. It's a mindset, it's a way of thinking, a way of channel your energy, let's say. This Firebox model came about for me in this way that I have 3 children, and my middle one, Jessica, she got diabetes type 1 when she was 9 years old. And diabetes is a disease where your pancreas, I think it's called in English, stops producing insulin. And insulin is a hormone that is used in your body so that when you have digested your food, you have sugar in your blood. What the hormone does is it opens up the cell to allow the energy into the cell. And if you don't have a hormone for that, insulin, you will die. So you need to take a shot when you eat, and also in some other situations as well, so to keep your body absorbing the energy you need, right? And in order to do that, you have to check your blood sugar. You have to take insulin in different doses. It's called units typically. So here's what happens. She gets sick, we go to a hospital, we came out to a hospital. It's not a nice thing at all, because you realize that your child is sick and will be sick for the rest of her life, and you want to take that away from her if you could, but you can't. So at one point I said to her, because I was driving 1 hour 15 minutes or so to work, and if you're up all night doing blood sugar curves and stuff, after a few days, you start to be quite tired. And in this case, after a few years, I said to Jessica, you need to own your diabetes. I'm sorry, but you have to own it. And the only thing I can give you, I know you want me to bribe you now, but you need to own it, and I can give you a good life. That's the only thing you can get from this, but it's worth it if you learn. So, in the beginning, her empowerment level for this task, taking care of your diabetes disease, she was on a level of what we call no-go. Right, nothing happened if I didn't give orders. Take the blood sugar, what is the level, take this many units for the food, things like that. But I obviously tried to talk to her about this and tried to encourage her to keep on moving, learning more, etc., etc. So one day she said, should I take the blood sugar now, Dad? And I said, yes. I said, yes. And she did it. Yes, go. And with some more encouragement, and I tried to really reinforce that positive behavior, one day she came and said, hey, it was 5.4. I said, what do you mean 5.4? Well, the blood sugar. Ah, okay, you took it? Yeah. We have a different scale in Sweden, at least. I don't know about the rest of Europe, but in Sweden, where I'm from, than US have. So I was a bit surprised. I was very happy. I obviously encouraged her even more. So what happened? She did it, and then she told me, go tell. Now I'm not a bottleneck anymore, right? You see there's a line here, you can say, before I had to be involved in the decision to make anything happen, but now it happens on its own. And I kept on going, and one day I realized that she hadn't told me anything about the blood sugar level or anything else. So I asked her, and she said, yeah, of course I did. What do you mean? I'm not supposed to? So of course she has now moved on further in the scale. She's now at go. She doesn't ask, she doesn't tell me. It just happens. Go. It's great. If you get people up to go, that will be fantastic, because things start to happen without you having to interact. And of course, empowerment is not about anarchy. Some people misunderstand that people can do anything they like at any time. That's empowerment. It is not empowerment if you don't know the objectives, the targets, the strategy, right? This is called anarchy, and that's not what we're looking for here at all. So. But Jessica, she's a very creative person. She writes, she draws, etc. But one day she decided, after going to school for those type of studies, that she wanted to be a registered nurse. So she went to school and became a nurse, and she actually started working with people who are convicted to psychological care for crimes they committed. And she was a nurse there. So obviously people have diabetes there too. So she got something called a diabetes delegation. So this means that she could now take care of other people who have diabetes, and also actually teach doctors, because if you don't have diabetes, well, you don't have diabetes. You don't actually know exactly what it's like. So she knows a little bit more maybe than doctors sometimes. So she was at the level go coach, which is a person who is at the highest level of empowerment and can also teach others what it's like to be in that situation, and teach them how to become more empowered, right? But remember, this is task oriented. So Jessica is empowered to work on her diabetes, but buying a house, well, not so empowered. She doesn't know how, right? So she needs to learn more before she can be empowered. So the being able is a key part there. You have to be able to do it, otherwise it's hard to take on anything. And this is a communication tool. As a matter of fact, in some companies I've been working, they use this for their appraisals every year, where they sit down and talk, and I've been doing this too. You pick up out some key tasks for a person, and you score each other, or not each other necessarily, but the score from both sides, the person doing a task and the manager, and discuss where they are in this empowerment level, which is very helpful, because what happens often is that the employee or the person you're talking to often moves to the box you want them in when you tell them, because if you never told them, they're guessing what you want them to do. It's a very good tool for that, to say, I want you to be in go or go tell or whatever it could be. Not all the jobs and all the tasks that you do, you want people to be in the highest level. Right? You don't want people to change your bookkeeping in any way they like, or be super creative with that, right? Or something like that. But also there are other things, like, for example, if you're an airline pilot, you fly, everything is on order, right? Basically, you back out, you push back from the gate, you take a certain runway, you're going to fly on a certain height and speed and direction. This is done on orders, right? The only time they become a little bit creative and open and can do anything they like is basically the weather and sports results or something like that. But and if something happens, right, that's why they are there for. If something happens, they have to take control and do something. But most of it is a very low level of empowerment in a sense. But when they need to, they can move up. So that's kind of the thought process. But if you don't know what to do to move a person from one box to another, there's something called the conditions of empowerment. And I'm going to show you them. I'm going to move back to my computer and show you a screen and go through those conditions here. And there's a drawing here as well to show that empowerment is not only related to a person, it could also be related to teams. So you can empower a whole team. For example, an improvement team can be empowered to complete some tasks that they are faced with. Here are the conditions for empowerment. So let me just take you through them and explain what this means. And this is, again, something that I use to understand what I need to put some focus on to move a person from one box to another, should it be unclear what's needed to do there. So first of all, the person who's going to be empowered have to know the strategy and the broader plan, right? Otherwise, again, it becomes anarchy if they do whatever they like. It's not correct. And they have to understand the immediate objectives, of course. That's a key thing as well. They have to have access to the information, data, etc. that's needed to complete the task. And that's not always something that you can have accessible right where you are, but at least you need to know where to go to get it. And there has to be a method of maintaining contact. So the person who actually gives away the delegation, that person has to meet at times with the person who's getting empowered, because otherwise you cannot check and feel the support from the managers. And a very key and very important part, that you don't leave people alone with their task necessarily. So they have a chance. They can at least call you, email you, meet you on a regular basis. Maybe you have performance control meetings or something like that, daily meetings, etc. And you have to have the training and skills to complete the task. Absolutely important, of course, otherwise nobody can complete and feel that they own it. So that's clear, I think, for most people. Trust, of course, both ways is an important part. But also, which is, I think, not so obvious for everyone, which is to be able to risk making a mistake. Because people don't really move much if they know they're going to get hurt by making a mistake here, right? So there are obviously some things that you can't do. In some scenarios, they could be really dangerous if you make a mistake. But as a general idea, you have to be able to make mistakes. And when I used to work with jet engines, Swedish Air Force, and I worked for a company called Volvo, and we made jet engines for the Swedish Air Force. My manager, he was a pilot, and he told us a story there that really stuck with me. There was a pilot who flew an older aircraft in Sweden, and in that type of aircraft, when you sit down in a cockpit of a fighter aircraft, you're going to connect your shoes to the chair. There's like a wire, and you connect your arms, or you have at least a net. They're gonna, when you eject, if you have to eject and get out of the airplane, your arms have to go and cross in front of you, because if you have an arm out like that, the band is going to snap, right? And if you don't bring your shoes with you when you shoot out, you're going to disconnect your knees and stuff, so to speak. So it's very important. And obviously you strengthen your back, and you have to go out really fast, right? Because you have the tail coming pretty quickly behind. You get a very split personality, let's say, if you don't move pretty fast. So that's why you need to bring everything with you and go out. But in this aircraft also, which is very unique, you had to connect a wire to like a hooked into the airplane, so that when you ejected, you got the parachute was ejected by the wire kind of pulling. The problem was when you landed and was disembarking the airplane, if you forgot to disconnect that wire and you stood up, you had a parachute in the cockpit. You had to get up and go down the ladder on the side of the airplane and walk across the tarmac. You had all your other pilots and colleagues are laughing at you. And this guy had done that at least a couple of times, and he came up with the ultimate solution, how to make sure he will never do that again and be laughed at. He didn't connect, right? He had told people that he did that, so that's how we know it. Because what happens was in Sweden, when they practice, they practice on the combat level, right? So they fly treetop level as opposed to very high up and practice. So they do it in that way. If you practice a lot in a simulator, you get muscle memory. So his nose pointed down suddenly in one situation, and he ejected and went out without the parachute. So he died, right? And here's the thing: is this person couldn't take the fact that he made a mistake, and people laughed at him. And I'm thinking he was specifically targeted for this job because he had to work under high stressful situations. He had to perform his task with the risk of his life, and not everybody can do that, right? And I know I'm not picked because of those reasons for the job I'm doing. So I think most people aren't. So what happens to most people if they get laughed at, or somehow, a mistake is noticed, it's talked about, they're going to stop very soon. So I think that is something to bear in mind. That is something that not even really, really strong people, mentally strong people, can handle. So we have to care for each other when it comes to that, that's for sure. Authority limits understood. It's an important part. And as a matter of fact, there's another story. I worked with a company where we had a team who had done some fantastic work around the production line, making roof tiles in this case. And by the end of the improvement team work, they presented, and the maintenance manager said, no, I'm not having any of this. I don't want us to do this. I don't like the idea. And it was a personal choice kind of thing, right? And of course, he managed to disempower people dramatically. Because imagine if you buy into this and you feel like you're doing something good, and you worked for maybe 3 months to implement this, and then somebody else comes on a whim and tells you that you can't do it, right? We had to talk in this case to the maintenance manager and explain that we have already given them the right, and you were there when we did, right? So we can't really take it back now. It's a little bit too late, and we don't want to kill the enthusiasm and the empowerment that they have. And he agreed over time there, but this is a key part as well. What are the limits you put? You don't have to give people like any limit, a reasonable limit, so they know what to do and when to go and ask for help, right? That's why important to maintain the contact as well. And then you have the last one, which is rewarding according to the strategy. Here's something I've seen. I give you an example of something I've seen. You have 2 production lines. One line, you have operators who are fully empowered, and they have done autonomous maintenance work. They do all the tasks they need to every day, every week, every month, etc. They do all the 5S housekeeping work. They work on the short stops, losses that they have. They have performance control, day by the hour boards. That works, and they keep it running, and it works. Then you have another line where people are not so empowered. They don't do what they should do, and they fall behind. At one point, we asked the people who fall behind, let's say the line B in this case. Line B has to go and work overtime and come back to a good position again. And when they've done that, what I can see sometimes is that we give praise to the people who have done the overtime and came back again. But we forget to give praise to the people who are doing everything they should and never fall behind. So it's important to remember here that rewarding according to the strategy is pretty important, right? We can't really mess around with that too much. So we have to think about what is it that we really want from this, right? And it's an unfortunate habit, I think, to reward the bad behavior from the beginning, if that makes sense. So when it comes to people who've been empowered and when you can see the positive effects of that. I have seen a lot of empowerment situations where the solutions that comes from people are dramatically much better. And the buy-in especially, right? Imagine if somebody has been there, felt that they had the right to implement the solution, and then when they're going to hold the gains for that solution, it's not that hard anymore because it's their own idea and they have built it, and there's no reason for anyone to worry about if the sustainability is going to be there because it just happens naturally, I think. So it's a key part of that as well. But I think especially the solutions that comes out of people when they're empowered and have the right to do things. But there has also a side effect that is not so clear. Because when you get empowered in one area, chances are that you're going to feel that power and the importance and the trust that people put into you, and it has a ripple effect around. Other things happens as well that you didn't expect. So, for example, I worked as a production manager building jet engines at one point. I had a fantastic team of people there, absolutely outstanding team of people who worked with me to create the vision and the strategy. And then we decided out of, I think, 30 or so tasks that we had lined up there. There wasn't a very sophisticated way of prioritizing them, I have to say, because many years ago I wasn't really so good at the operational excellence as I am now. I think at least I learned a bit in the last 20 years. But what we did was we basically prioritized what we're going to do. We took 15 tasks. So we don't have time to do it all. Let's do the 15. We put some small teams together. They all worked on it. We discussed every week where they are. We did as much as we could, try to empower and then drive it forward. After some time, all those 15 tasks were done. So obviously very happy. Everything looks much better. We are working in a more efficient way. We reduced the lead times and so on, assembly times. But then what happened was we said, okay, let's sit down and talk about the other 15 tasks to see where we can start doing them. And we went through them. And all of them were already done, right? They were already completed. So I said to the team, like, well, what happened? We weren't supposed to do. We didn't have time to do that. What happened here? What's going on? And they said, yeah, but it was important. So we did it anyway, right? And imagine the feeling I had at that moment, right? The team had just made something happen without me asking for anything or. They just felt it, and they knew that they had the right to do it, and they never asked for permission to do anything. They just did it anyways. Fantastic feeling, right? And that, you feel pretty powerful when you can get stuff done when you haven't even really asked for it, other than you create the strategic plan at one point and then it just happens. So that is something to think about when it comes generally. But here's the thought. It should be a strategy around it, because if it's a one-time, one-off thing where you empower people here and there, it's not as effective, right? You want to make sure you drive an empowerment towards everyone. And I know you won't be able to empower everybody, but you can have that mindset and the idea that you're going to empower everyone. At least try it and see what happens. But let me go back to the presentation and show you something here. You could ask yourself, in this case, what is your strategy to empower? So what are the steps you actually take? Yeah, do you have empowered people? I'm sure you have. But are they empowered because you made a conscious decision to empower them and you take the correct steps towards them being empowered? Or is it something that just happened because, it happened for some people? You can think about what are the biggest hurdles or the hurdle that you have here. Is there anything that you can do? What would you do to get around that? And then a couple of my favorite questions is, what would happen if you could empower everybody? What would happen? Think about that. What would happen in your organization if the power level increased on the people? And what if you could do what happened to me with that the assemblers there, that suddenly tasks start to be completed that you never thought would be completed? So it's pretty cool. But also, what would you do if you could empower everybody? What would you actually do now? How would that look for you, right? These are good questions to think about, I think, and start planning out a little bit. But obviously, if you're going to go to the top of the Eiffel Tower, I don't know how many steps there are, and I know you take an elevator or so, but I know one thing. I started on step number 1, right, and then 2, etc. So it could be a good idea to slowly move up and maybe start in a smaller scale with 1 person, 2 people, but at least have an idea what is the strategy all about. What are you trying to achieve with this? And then strategically work on it. And using the Firebox model, I really recommend that, because it's a good communication tool. Most people understand it, and most people move to the right position because you told them what you expect from them when it comes to that. And we rarely do that. At least I've never had anyone doing that. And of course, I put it in here, the email address to ask. In case you have a question, you come up with something later on, make a note of that one. Let's do it at askldi.com. You can reach out to us there and ask questions. And don't worry about getting charged for anything here. It's a question here and there, no problem. We will happy to help out in the best way we can, because for us this is very important, and there's a lot of opportunities when it comes to empowerment and people in this case. So that's a short summary. Empowerment is talking about somebody who is willing, able, and allowed to complete a task. It's task oriented. There are tools, for example, Firebox Model, but you can use that for a person or a team, and you can discuss with them and use it as a communication tool, focusing on 1 task at a time. I recommend you not focusing on more than 2 or 3 every time you work with somebody, to make sure it really is worked through properly. And if you don't know how to move between those boxes, you can use the conditions for empowerment to think about how well have people understood, and how deep is that knowledge and the thought process around all those conditions, right? That's something for you to think about. And if you want to see effects like the ones that I've seen with people's performing on a total different level than I expected, and tasks being completely faster than I ever expected, it is pretty amazing actually. But for some managers I met who are worried about this, they often take it as anarchy, but it's about empowerment, so that strategy and broader plan and immediate target, this is key, right? Otherwise we're talking about something else than empowerment. Okay. I hope this makes sense to you all, and I hope my stories helps a little bit to explain what's possible to do here. And it doesn't have to be that hard to get started, is my point. So let me open up for some questions. If you have some thoughts and questions around this, and that you want to ask me something, feel free to do so. I already got something in here before. So one question I got here was, how do you overcome your inner voice telling you to keep hold of the control you have? And so that's a very good question, because as a manager you can feel like I'm going to lose something when I give it away. And the only advice I have for that really is, first of all, ask yourself, what would happen if you could do it? Right? What would happen? What would be the reason for you? Is the reason strong enough for you to actually give away some power? Do you want to have better performance in your team? And if you don't want to have this, what is the reason? If you can figure out why you're worried about it, it's good, right? It's hard sometimes to do that to yourself. But if you can, it will be good. But if you find out that you want to get started, I would start in small steps. I would pick 1 person, I would pick 1 task, and I sit down with a Firebox model. And that actually connects to another question that just pops up here. What is the simplest and fastest way to get started with this? I think it is to pick 1 person and pick a task and work on the Firebox model with them and see how you can get them moving, and make sure those 10, not 10 conditions, the conditions for empowerment are there with you when you do that. I think that's the easiest way of doing it. Don't think that you have to empower everybody in one go or start with a team or anything like that. Start with one person. I think that's absolutely enough. And then you get used to it, because it's the way to explain those 5 steps, you know, that's so people can see the difference, is kind of important, I believe. I hope that answers the question there. See what other questions we have on this. See, I got some coming in here. Let's see what we have. So one question was here is, I don't think my organization is ready for this. How do I get started in a small way? It's a similar thing here, right? It's starting with one person. I think is absolutely perfect. But of course, sometimes when you work on especially improvements and change, you're going to have we call this the diamond model, where you have 20% of the people are quite positive, you have 20% of the people being negative to this, and 60% haven't chosen yet. Working on this with a negative 20%, that will be the hardest way of doing it, I believe. Because what I find is people who are quite negative, they also want your time, they want your attention, and they don't want to change their mind very easily. And that has nothing to do with that they're really stubborn and in their ways necessarily. It's also the fact that they get a lot of attention from you. So why would they change and be positive if they lose the attention that you give them? So I think that starting with people who are quite positive to begin with, I think is a good idea. We have another person saying, what do I look for in a person to tell that they are ready to be empowered? Yes, so that is a tricky one. I would say, I would think about if that person has a positive attitude in general. If you think that you can communicate in a good way with them, so that they don't feel like you said it in this way, it has to be like that, they're a little bit flexible, they you can say, I'm also learning here, so let's learn together. If that person is open to learn, open to try a little bit, and has this positive attitude, I think that is very, very helpful to start with, right? And then maybe I change my mind and say, maybe you don't start with one person, I will probably start with 2, because it's always good to have 2 going on, because if it doesn't work with one, then you can think that the system doesn't work, the idea doesn't work. But as a matter of fact, it could be that person. So if you have 2 people, yeah, you can see that if they work with one, why didn't it work with the other one? Maybe in the way I said it, or and so on. So it's always good to have, like, and when I pilot something, I try to do it with 2, I think. Okay, let's see if we have anything else coming in here. Okay, so I got a question before here that was about, what if you want to be empowered but your manager doesn't seem to want to empower you? Okay, so that's some people say you have to manage upwards, but I don't think you manage people upwards, but what you do is you influence, I think. So what I would do, and I've seen this work in the past actually, is to take the model, the Firebox model, talk about the task that you want to be empowered to do, take the model and go and talk to your manager and explain the model and talk about you wanting to be empowered and if they're okay with this level. It could work to try it that way and see if you can influence them to allow you, right? I think that could be a good idea. Okay, we have Sarah here saying, how would you share this with your management team to make sure we all do this in the same way? Yeah, so I'll probably, what I would do is I will probably do what I did here. I mean, maybe even use this video potentially. Why not? I mean, that's perfectly fine. Because it talks about the definition, the Firebox model, the conditions. So either share this video with people, or copy the video and see what you can, if you can follow that model going forward. And I think that most people see this. But I would pay, especially with the management team, I would pay attention to the question, what would happen if we could do it? Can we imagine this in front of us, what the effect could be. Because if you don't see the effect being positive, you're not going to put any time on it. I hope that is a good answer for that. How do I measure effectiveness or benefits of the process? Okay, so how do I measure that? So here's a problem with feelings. I don't really know a way of measuring how people feel, right? Because when you start talking to people, you also affect how they feel. So it's not that easy to actually measure that, but what I do is I measure the effect of how people would feel when they are empowered. So you could potentially measure number of activities that get done in your action plans. You could look at improvements going faster than before. You can look at how many follow-up meetings and so action meetings do you need to have. Can you reduce your own time and still get more output there? Can you see that being something that you do? And I will measure it on sustainability as well. How many times do we need to go in and correct again if something is going wrong, for example? Things like that, this is what I think I would measure it with, right? Because measuring how many people have gone through a session or something, that doesn't say that they're empowered, only that you've gone through something. So I will be careful with that, but I will look at the effect you're looking for. I gave you some examples here, but you might look for another type of effect. But I will look for that. But the key thing here is it more, is it faster, or is it sustainable? There are those things that really stands out, I think, when people are empowered. Hope that helps. Okay, we have Robert here who says, how do you deal with a person who has learned to rely on others to take responsibility and shy away from acting empowered? Yeah, that's Robert. That's a complicated thing, right? And I always recommend electricity. no, it's just joking aside. This is complicated because the complication here is there are people who you will never be able to convert in any direction, right? As I said, those people are quite negative. You could talk to them separately. So I recommend not talking to people in a team setting because they could influence other people and they talk to them and they give them a negative view and they might win some people over to that side, so to speak. I will talk to them separately and I will try to see if I can get that person to take on smaller tasks to do something and try to empower that person in an area I know they are knowledgeable, right? I think that will be pretty good and start there, I believe. But I would not do it in a big team setting and because if they don't change their mind without losing their face, basically, if that makes sense. So yeah, happy you're laughing, Robert. So anyways, I think that would be what I would do. But there's a personal reason, if it's possible to understand, depends on how many people you have reporting to and how much time you have. But if it would be possible to understand what makes the person afraid of taking on the responsibilities and being empowered. And I think there's something in those conditions there's a mismatch there. Sometimes it's skills. Just because you worked in a place for a long time doesn't mean that you actually know everything, right? It means that you've been there for a long time. That's the only thing, it's for sure. Okay, we have Mary saying, I don't think I'm good at this. How do I come across as genuine and authentic when trying to implement this? Well, that is a very good question. How do you come across as genuine and authentic? You know what I will probably do is I will take these models, but the story of Jessica and her diabetes is obviously my story, right? I will try to talk about those levels with a story that is related to you. I think that helps tremendously, that you can talk from yourself and experiences that you had, and maybe especially a situation where you were disempowered, like I've been disempowered where I was asked to build a break room for teachers, where I was a teacher at Volvo for a while, and the manager never really intended us to do this, and he took away all the rights in the end because he has changed his mind. It was very disempowering. Telling a story like that, it makes it real, right? And it's a story where people can feel the disempowerment. It's often easier to understand empowerment, but understanding what is not, right? Because being empowered is something that's very comfortable for most people. So it's hard to explain it like that. So I hope that helps as an answer there. Okay, so this opened my eyes. I think we've been guilty of holding on too much. I'm really excited to see what happens when I try empowering my team a little more. Okay, cool. Yeah. Good luck with that, John. I hope that we will be beneficial. And again, just please feel free to use this video. I mean, it's it's definitely there for you to use and learn and pick the models. Just use them. And the more you do it, the more authentic it's going to sound when you speak about it too, right? But I have to say one thing is when I'm new at something, I tell people, I'm new at this, right? So I'm also learning. Are you okay if we try together? Can you help out? You create a little bit of a bond when you become a little bit vulnerable as a manager, I believe. It's always good to show that you're not a superhuman in any way, right? So it's good to show some vulnerability, I believe. Okay, let's see if we have something else from anyone. Yeah, you're welcome, Daniel, no problem. Happy to help. Okay, let's see if we have it is now, it's a couple of more minutes here before we close this down, see if there's any more questions. If not, then let me say this, thank you so much for taking the time, Friday afternoon or whenever you're watching this. You might watch a recording. Thank you for watching this, and I hope this gives you a little bit of new ideas and new thoughts about how to deal with things and maybe try something out that be quite positive and look at your team as maybe they need a little bit more. Yeah, you're welcome, Mary. Okay, thank you so much. Again, thank you so much. Be safe. Please use this, and I hope that everything goes well with you. And reach out. Let's do it at askldi.com for any questions you have. Be happy to help you out. Okay, thank you, and have a very good weekend. Thank you for now.